It's the year 1968 when an American ethologist and behavioral researcher named John Calhoun performed one of the strangest scientific experiments in history. The idea of this experiment was to create a paradise and a new universe. He wasn't going to create a paradise for humans, but a paradise and a universe for mice, and the result he reached stunned all scientists. John began introducing 4 pairs of mice to his room designed especially for them, which it was called the rodent Utopia. He built several homes for the mice, providing them with an endless supply of food and drink, as well as nesting tools. The only thing lacking in that microcosm was space, as it was a limited room. Calhoun knew it was only a matter of time before that paradise turns into hell. Those mice had no concern for anything. They didn't think about food or water because they were right in front of them the whole time and without interruption, just as if they were in paradise. They didn't feel any fear of being hunted by predators as they were in a safe and closed room. The ventilation, climate, and temperature were perfect, and even that room was specially made so that the mice wouldn't contract any diseases. And the mice continued to live a nice life in that miniature paradise for a long time, not needing anything. The experiment began, and as expected, the mice took advantage of the time they usually waste searching for food and shelter to overbreed. The number of mice increased every 55 days. In the first weeks of the experiment, they were very happy. Everything they desired was found in front of them, including food, drink, fun, and sex, and more than that, they were safe and sound. But 100 days after the beginning of the experiment, and by virtue of the fact that the mice were mating frequently because of a life of luxury, they began to multiply greatly. And on day 315, it was noticed that the males stopped protecting their private areas that they control. Because their small universe became full of males, so they refrained from fighting because it had become useless. When the number of mice reached 620, the increase slowed, doubling every 145 days. Here, luxury and prosperity began to disappear, and the mice community began to face problems. Calhoun described the behavior of mice as follows. Many female mice were unable to carry on with pregnancy to the end nor survive after giving birth, that's if they became pregnant. A larger number of females also stopped the maternal role even after successfully giving birth. As for the males, they began to eat each other and became homosexual, and rabies began to spread among them. After they were eating food whenever they wanted, it turned out that they turned into pathological withdrawal, in which the mice leave their homes to eat, drink, and move only when the other mice are asleep. John Calhoun says that the common source of these disturbances became more evident in our first series of the 3 experiments, where we noticed the evolution of what we called the behavioral sink. The mice were huddled together as many as possible in one of the 4 interconnected cages in which the colony was located. Up to 60 of 800 mice from each experimental group meet in one cage during feeding periods, and mice rarely eat alone. As a result, severe population density developed in the cage used for eating, leaving other cages with low population numbers. In trials in which the behavioral sink developed, the infant mortality rate rose to 96% among the most disruptive groups in the population. After a year and 6 months from the beginning of the experiment, the number of mice in Universe 25 reached 2,200 mice. Although the place was able to accommodate twice that number, most of the newly born mice were dying quickly. The paradise in which they lived luxuriously began to turn into hell, where these mice began to die greatly due to hunger and disease, as well as stampede and wars among them. There was nothing left of them except for a group of mice that decided to isolate and live alone, which Calhoun called the beautiful ones. Those mice didn't die of violence or starvation, but died because of their isolation, as they lost all the social behaviors found in the instinct of mice. On day 600, pregnancy and fertility rates began to decline and approached zero, and the mice community began to gradually fade away due to the death of the young as soon as they were born. Even solitary mice died because mice are social. 2 years after the beginning of the experiment, the last mouse was born, and in 1973, all the mice in Universe 25 died. The Universe 25 experiment began with 8 mice, 4 males and 4 females, and by day 560 the number of mice had reached 2200, then it decreased dramatically to complete extinction. Hence, the experiment got its famous name, the behavioral sink, because the fate in the end was the same. If hunger doesn't kill everyone, then people will destroy themselves.